Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back. We're getting down to the wire here, and as we get towards the end, one thing I really wanted to talk about is just the step-by-step. I like to walk through things in their entirety because we talk about the pieces a lot, specifically if you read the ebooks and if you've watched all these videos, there's a lot of different moving parts, and we've done some deep dives into different topics. And I always think it's really good to just take a step back and say, okay, what does an example project look like? We obviously did a case study where I showed you how the model works really, really well. But now we're going to talk about like an actual step-by-step walkthrough to show you what the process will be to go from, hey, I'm interested in apps and I bought a source code all the way to, oh wow, look, I have 5,000 source codes or 5,000 apps in the App Store. And so I just want to run through this. We're going to talk about all the steps, and we're going to talk about best practices to give you both tactical messaging and also some ideas that you can use for yourself. So we're just going to run through this. And the goal of this presentation is I'm going to show you every single part of the process. You'll think of these like buckets, like there's 7 or 8 major buckets in a reskin project. I'm going to show you each part of those, which you already probably know based on the earlier videos, but it's just good to see them, all in one presentation. The second is I really want to help you organize your business because with so many moving parts, organization is going to be absolutely key. And you're going to see why when we talk about all this, especially when you start to scale. And third, I want you to learn how to prioritize and manage. I want you to say, okay, you might start off by being the guy or the woman who's changing the IDs, but I want you to understand, like, well, how do I get out of that? How do I start managing people that do this? And a lot of it comes down to just realizing that this is a process, is an operations platform, and that's something you can do very easily. And so what I want to do is I want to use the video merger code because I think that's one that a lot of us, it's easy to follow. It's a great reskin model. We obviously did a case study, and I think it makes sense to do it step by step for the app that we did a case study on. And chances are, just from a majority of the Blue Cloud community, even if you've reskinned a few apps, you'll understand this, and this is probably where you started, and you may still be there, which is totally fine. But you're going to chances are be starting with one source code or a couple source codes, some basic knowledge, like you've read some blog posts, you've downloaded some ebooks, you get it. You've got a ton of energy, a ton of fire, which I think is awesome, and it's very, very important. And then you have some experience, and maybe you have no experiences. But this typically, this is what a typical reskinner starts with. This is the position most of them start in, and that's great. I mean, the most successful people all start here, which is awesome. And so now we're just going to talk about the actual steps that you can do to make this happen. So the first step, and we've talked about this a little bit, but I want to reiterate, you have to plan ahead. Now, one of the reasons why I like the planning side of it is because this is free, okay? This is cheap. I mean, it takes a little time, but typically if you're getting started in a project and you're trying to use a plan, you want to keep your costs low. It's okay to spend your time on this and not spend any money. So the first thing is you got to create the plan. And how do you do that? Well, the first thing is you go out to the market, you do some keyword research. You go to something like Sensor Tower, you go into the actual app store, you go into App Annie, and you say, all right, what are the trends? What's hot right now? What categories do I like? What keywords are hot? Like Google Trends is a great example of that. But you go out and you get an idea of, hey, what's working right now? What are people doing that seems to be catching fire? The second is you want to have a team in place. So you don't have to necessarily hire anybody, but just start having conversations. Go on Elance, get these conversations going, make sure people have an idea of what you want to do. Or at the same time, send an email over to Angela's App Services or over to Reskin Games or one of these services and say, hey, look, I'm looking to get into this. What do I need to be thinking about? What's going to make this easier for you? Just do that. It's free. It's just a great place to start. Third is you want to have your developer accounts ready, right? Like if you buy your source code first and then say, okay, maybe then I'll go set up all my developer accounts, you typically want to say, all right, first step is I'm going to go out and I'm going to set up my Apple or Google or Amazon or Windows developer account and have that ready to go because sometimes it can take a few weeks, which can be a little bit frustrating. So you just want to make sure you hit the ground running on that. Fourth, I should say, is you want to determine what you will do versus who you'll hire. This is really important, right? Because it's easy to say, well, I'm just going to go and hire everyone to do this, do everything. And you get into the project and you realize, oh man, I could have done that so much easier and so much more quickly. And just being able to say, well, this project, I'm going to do this, or this project, they're going to do this, is really important. And then also, always, you guys know me, make sure you have your budget in place and stick to that budget. It's really important to have that discipline when you're starting that plan. The goal is to create a winning plan. Now, the first time you do this, it's probably not going to be the plan that's going to take you to the $1 million a month club. But the goal is you got to start somewhere, and you got to find out what works and what doesn't. And you also want to do this by spending as little as possible. So it's going to require a lot of energy on your part. Part of the plan is you got to pick the number of skins you want to produce, right? And this comes down to how much money do you have, or how much time do you have on the same token. How much time does your team have if you're hiring people, and what's your deadline? How fast do you want to get this done? Are you in the position where you can only take on one skin because this is like a weekend warrior project? That's totally fine. Or maybe you've got 3 months and you're just going to dive into this completely, and maybe it makes more sense for you to do 3 or 4 at a time. But just know that and be very honest with yourself about that. That's going to help craft your plan. You're going to have a very good idea, so that as soon as you buy a source code, you know what your next steps are. Step 2 is start going after the metadata. This is a mistake a lot of people make. They wait to until they've kind of bought the source code or see the app, and then they go out and they try to find keywords that they can kind of finagle into that app. The best thing you can do is to go out to the metadata, is go get keyword ideas and go get theme ideas way before you start spending a lot of money on designers or developers or anything like that. Go out there and say, this is an opportunity. Here's something I can capitalize on. This source code I have, this source code I'm going to buy, here's exactly what I can do to capitalize on this theme. That's going to make a huge difference. So just making sure you do that research before you dive in and start spending money. Because once you have that general idea and you understand what you want to capitalize on, that's when you start to send it to a designer. You can find the exact keywords that you want to use, and you're going to match the design to those keywords and the theme and all that. And that's how the icon and the screenshot's all going to match into this keyword volume and these trends that you're finding that are hot right now. Second part of the keyword is, don't compete too much with your skins. It can be hard, but make judgment calls, right? So let's say you get the video merger and you say, all right, like dating apps is really hot right now. How can I capitalize on dating apps? You got to think of different ways to use that same code that all capitalizes on that dating app industry. They can't just be like kind of small different tweaks on the same idea, because you're going to have a hard time getting all those uploaded into the store effectively, and you're going to end up competing with your own apps, which can be really difficult. The second thing is you want to diversify the icon. Video merger is a good example. We use completely different looking icons to make it happen. The screenshots will look completely different, especially the first screenshot, which is usually the most important one. And also, if you want to get into video previews, you can really differentiate your apps that way as well. Title, keywords, same thing. You want to just you want to test it, because that's also something that you can come back to and say, okay, this one worked really well. Maybe it was the keywords on this one and not on this one, and that's something you can really work out. Think about localization in terms of, hey, maybe there's a really hot photography category, but it's in China, right? Asia is just blowing up right now. There's huge opportunity in Asia and in China. And maybe you should think about localizing your app and say, hey, look, I'm not only going to capitalize on photo, I'm going to capitalize on the Chinese photo market. And that's something you should really think about too with your metadata. What countries are really hot as well. Put together a wish list of updates. And obviously this is going to change once you get feedback and reviews. But write down a handful of ideas and say, what are some of the updates you can do? And the best way to get ideas for updates is go out into the category you're in. So for video merger, I would go to the photo category. I would find apps that are doing similar things where you're using video and music and they're doing really well. And I would look at what their updates were and how did they make their product better, and I would just copy those updates. That's a really good way to do it. And then part of the whole thing with the metadata is you'll learn to create a system and outsource it. So with metadata, a lot of this is research. And there's a lot of different ways to determine what works and what doesn't. And as you go through this process, just like we talked about in the previous videos, make videos, right? Make PDFs, write down your actual process and do this step by step, because eventually you're going to be able to hand that over to a virtual assistant and they can take care of it. Okay, so the first step is you have a plan. The second step is you take the research and you go find the market, you find the demand, and you find out what's hot right now. The third step is you're going to go and you're going to buy the source code at this point. You're going to have a source code, and you're going to send the resources, which are the images, and instructions over to the designer. And so this is a screenshot of what it's going to look like to have, download the source code, and you get the images from it. And what you're going to do is you're going to briefly explain the project to the designer. You say, hey, look, here are the images for this app. Here's the theme and the keywords I want to capitalize on. Here's a little bit of direction for you. And we're going to try to do this a few times. All you need to do is redesign these file sizes so that it looks like this original app. Most of them are gonna understand what you're talking about with reskinning. They get it, but it's just good to kind of go through that process. What you also want to do is make sure that you keep the resource sizes very, very close to the exact so that it still matches up. So you don't have to do a whole lot of changing of buttons and things if you're just looking to do it that way. All you got to do is just copy and paste. You keep the same file names. One thing designers sometimes do is they rename files the same way that they're used to as opposed to what the project is used to. Always tell them, hey, look, keep the file names the same. Like, don't change the file names, just change the images and replace what was already in there. One thing you can do is make resource themes different, right? Like reuse as many resources as you can, buttons, tabs. And so what this means is like when you create a different theme, you can still use similar projects. So in the video merger, what you might be able to change the background and create a different display and design and theme of the entire app, but maybe the actual buttons themselves to move forward or backward are the same. Like that cuts down on your actual reskin and design cost. One of the classic examples that I use is always in casino games because you can reuse coins and cards very, very easily. And similarly, if you're doing a lot of different, like a bulk project, like let's say this is your 5th or 6th reskin, and you say, hey, look, I want to do 5 at a time. Make sure you always ask for a discount. If they're charging you $100 for each design, and you ask for 5, say like, I want this done for 20% off or whatever it may be. With the designer, make sure you agree on the price up front. Make sure you agree on the deadline up front, and make sure you agree on consequences. And by saying, this needs to be done by this date, and if it's not done by this date, here's what's going to happen. That can be something like, I'm going to dock you 5% of your pay, or I'm going to delay your payment, or whatever it may be. But you gotta agree on whatever consequences there are. And here's a quick tip for you with the designer. Think about shuffling the content. Change the look of the layout, right? Like you can have the exact same design, like you can reskin it correctly, but maybe a button, it was on the right before, now it's on the left. I used to do this a lot with some of my old arcade games to make the game look a little different. Just move things around a little bit. This is going to get into the developer can help out, but these are really easy changes. And it's not necessarily technically skinning because you're not doing anything differently, but it will help create a different sort of flow within the app. It can be very subtle. But start thinking about that too. Is like how can I make the actual layout a little bit better too? And that's when you get into step 4 with your developer. So your designer's got his instruction or her instructions, and they're ready to rock. You talk to your developer, and sometimes it is the same person, but I'm just saying, if you're using 2 different people. And the developer is going to take the graphics. Let's say your designer's done with the graphics. The developer is going to take these, and they're going to put these into the source code. They're going to paste these into the actual source code. And then you're going to send them instructions from whatever place you bought the source code. So if you buy it from Blue Cloud, you're going to have a full documentation that you can send them that's going to show them everywhere in the code where they need to update things like ad networks and in-app purchases, Game Center, all the IDs you need, bundle IDs, everything else. And you're going to talk about any additional functions you want to add. For video merger, you may say, hey, look, there's 4 songs you can buy right now. I'd love to add 3 more before we upload this. Here are the files. Can you add those 3 in-app purchases to the code? Things like that you'll talk to your developer about. Along with that is like you'll need to create ad IDs for the developer unless you hire them to do it for you. Okay, so this is a good example. Let's say in video merger there is a banner ad or there's a full screen ad for App 11 or Chart Boost. You're going to need to go into those ad networks and say, okay, I'm creating my account. I'm creating my own, let's say AdMob, for example, is the banners for Google. And you say, I'm going to create my own AdMob account. I'm going to create a banner, and I'm going to get an ID so that my developer has our unique ID. Otherwise, you're going to be using a placeholder one that's in there. And sometimes the developers can go in and do this, but sometimes you want to do this, or your virtual assistant will do this. But you're going to, someone's going to need to create the new ad IDs for your developer, and then you're going to send it to them. There's something they're going to ask for. You're going to need to give them access to your iTunes Connect account. There's ways to do this so that they can only access certain parts of your account, or you can just give them full access. That's totally up to you. I tend to trust my developers, for better or for worse, and I give them full access. But you'll need to give them a login, and you can set the permissions on that if you'd like. And when they're in there, also ask them to set up the in-app purchases while they're doing it. The in-app purchase setup can be a little tricky if you're not programmatically, if you don't know that. You can learn it in about in a couple hours if you'd like to. Otherwise, just tell the developers, hey, when you create this app ID, can you set up the in-app purchases as well? They should be able to do that, no problem. And that leads us into iTunes Connect. Okay, so you've got your plan, you have your metadata, you get the designer, you got all the designs. The developer's taken it all, they've updated all the IDs, they've merged all the images together. Next thing that's going to happen is they're going to publish this into iTunes Connect, right? So you're going to go in, or the developer, or maybe yourself, you're going to go into iTunes and you're going to create the entry. This means like you are going to create the app in iTunes Connect, right? You're going to add a title, you're going to add an icon, you're going to put in your description and some screenshots and your keywords and your, how to rate the app and things like that. And you should do this until you can train and hire a virtual assistant to do this. It's not that complicated, but there are just like a lot of different parts. And this is something you should really think about. You'll always be training, maybe have your developer start with this, but you always want to be thinking, all right, I don't want to be doing this long term because this becomes a big bottleneck. I can promise you that. And then you start combining everything and along with while this is happening with iTunes Connect. So you get all the images back from the designer, you send them to the developer, they combine everything, make sure it all looks good, and then bam, you upload this into that iTunes Connect entry that you just created. And your developer is going to upload it because it's just going to be a lot easier for them to upload it. And then you wait for the approval. It's going to say waiting for review. It might give you a few like, hey, there's a few kind of errors in here. Most of the time, it doesn't mean anything. It's just like, best practices that you don't need to worry about. And then you wait for approval. And that can be, like we said in the previous slide, anywhere from like 6 to 11 days, depending on what store you're in and how busy the market is. So the app goes live and gets approved, and you have a big champagne celebration party. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to measure this. Okay, this is just part of the process where naturally you're going to go and you're going to go to App Annie, which I would definitely recommend. It's free, and set up an account and sync your iTunes Connect account to that. You could just go straight into iTunes Connect, but it's a little clunky. So use App Annie; it's really helpful. And just see what your download numbers are. Not only see what your total download numbers are, see what countries it's getting downloaded in the most. Sometimes the most popular apps are they blow up in places like Denmark or France or Thailand or China or whatever. And that can be a really good opportunity for you. The other thing is you want to check the revenue numbers, and you can do that both from in-app purchases and Chartboost, but you can also, in App Annie, but you can also go to things, your ad networks like Chartboost or AdMob or whatever it may be, and just get a sense of what those are starting to look like. Start to track in-app analytics. So if you install something like Google Analytics in your app, start to look at that as well. So let's say you get 50 downloads in the first week. Look at what those users are doing. How often do they use the app? What are they doing within the app? What kicks them out? And start to look at that and start to say, okay, well, what else do I want to be tracking within the app? And finally, watch the reviews come in and learn from those reviews. Start to say, okay, I'm getting 4 or 5 reviews this month. What are they saying to me? How can I get more feedback? One thing we talk about in the ebooks a lot is setting up support accounts and setting up like a Facebook page for your brand and for your apps, and asking people, hey, if you don't want to leave a review, send us a support email, request a feature, let us know what you like, what you don't like. And then finally, just repeat that process, right? That's it. Like that's the reskinning process. We're going to run through the whole thing one more time. But before we do, I just want to say a few things to think about as you're going through this, because they don't really fit in any particular step. It's just kind of taking each step and going a little deeper. So for ad networks, this is something that all of you at some point are probably going to deal with, because it's a great way to make money. Organization is really important, because you got to remember, you might think you only have 5 or 10 apps right now. That's going to balloon into 500 apps very, very quickly. And the more you can organize this dashboard, the better you're going to be. So when you think about, okay, I'm going to set up a new app, think about how you organize it. Think about the process of building a new app in your ad network, getting a new ID, getting it set up. Using things like Google Docs is a great way to do that, but make sure that you document this from the start and have either yourself or your virtual assistant doing this in a very systematic way. It's going to make your life a billion times easier. Trust me. I mean, this has been one of the biggest nightmares for our company because we didn't set this up correctly. What you want to do is you want to set up a unique ad ID for each skin, right? Like this is going to help with future campaigns and turning on and off individual apps without affecting every skin. Now, this is a best practice. So for example, let's say you make 10 reskins of the video merger. In a perfect world, you want to create 10 ad IDs. Now, if you're getting to the point where it's just so unbelievably difficult to track all those, you can start to scale it back and say like, okay, well, every for all the skins that use this same source code, I'm going to use the same ID because that's going to kind of bundle everything into the same type of functionality, and then you can use it. Use your best judgment on that. I would definitely recommend the more you can individualize it, the better. But it does kind of come down to you and your own operations. And if it's feasible, test different ad networks between skin projects. So you might be using Chartboost, and they might be doing really well, and then all of a sudden they're just not doing that well. And you want to be able to say, all right, well, I'm going to try AppLovin now, or I'm going to go try InMobi or Mopub or AdMob or whatever it may be. Try different ones because you're going to be amazed at how much of a difference you can have based on the type of app you have, the size of the ad you have, the different relationships the ad networks get. So just try to test those out. It's going to add another layer of complication, but it can be very lucrative if you do it well. So testing is kind of a second best practice to think about. It's really important to test, and a lot of people say, well, okay, I got the source code, I just put graphics on, obviously it's dialed in, this is going to work exactly the way I want. But what you don't remember is that developers are still going in, they're still testing it or messing with it. It's really important when they send it to you, just give it a spot check. Say, like, is this working the way I want? Now this is a double-edged sword because you don't want to have get sucked into the details and be like, well, can you tweak this? Can you tweak this? You just want to get it uploaded, but you also want to make sure that the apps aren't going to crash when you're uploading it. And if you don't have time to test each app, hire someone to do a quick glance over. This is really not that hard at all. You can hire a virtual assistant. You can go on something like Fiverr. You can do anything where you say, look, I need you to go through these 5 steps, make sure that this all works, and then that's my approval process. That can take 10 minutes for anyone to do. Developers can get sloppy, okay? They just make the tester focus on the quality of the images, make sure everything looks sharp and everything's all set and everything's in the right position. And before you submit, have your developer send you something like a test build through like TestFlight or Diawi or whatever works for you. But this is a great just best practice to get into. You say, look, right before you upload it, let's have someone just look at it for 10 minutes just to make sure that everything's all set. Leverage. You guys probably know by now that I love leverage. I think that leverage is one of the greatest things in the entire world, especially in business. And in reskinning, there's 2 types to think about as you create and scale these processes. The first is the classic example, right? Like you reskin the same source code a few times. You take the video merger code and you make 5 versions. That's what I did. It worked really well. The second type of leverage is you reskin the video source code 5 times, and then you go out and you buy a new source code and you use 30% of the graphics from the reskin from video merger in your new Gem.dot source code or your Tiger app or whatever it may be. But those are 2 really good ways to leverage your ideas. And so start thinking about that as this process goes on. When you're going to your designer again, you say, look, I only need 50% of this reskin because we can use the rest of that. And then you talk to the developer and say, hey, reuse these graphics, whatever. Do this in every part of the business, like keywords, screenshots, everything. I mean, you can just go out and if you create a PSD template, a Photoshop template for your screenshots, all you got to do is swap in the backgrounds and you can keep all the other stuff right there. Keywords, if you find a handful of keywords that work really well for a specific app, reuse some of those. You don't need to start over all the way from scratch. And just be smart about it. Like you can't, leverage doesn't mean that it's just a really easy way to create clones of each other because you have to make your app look different, but you can be really smart and be really clever about how you use this. Submission scheduling, we talked about this with the publishing and having multiple developer accounts, but just remember, like, organization is always going to be key because one of the biggest reasons why apps don't get uploaded is because a developer is saying like, well, you didn't give me approval on app number 14, or I don't have an ad ID for app number 9. Organization is going to help you with that. And the more you spread it out, the further apart your apps are submitted, the higher the approval rate. This is just anecdotal. This is what everyone goes through, myself included. It's not the funnest thing because you might feel like you're losing a little bit of that speed, but it's more of a safety net, especially at the beginning. You want to walk in with that sort of attitude. And if necessary, don't release any skins until all are approved. You don't necessarily need to. You can set the release date for way in the future so that it might get approved and then it just gets kind of held in a pending queue. And when you're ready to release, push it live. The best practice is kind of, you just don't want to submit skins within the same week. You don't want to pump out 5 or 6 or even 2 skins within the same week because the reviewers typically will look at the other apps in your account and they're going to say, well, what are these people uploading? And the less often you do it, the better. Post approval, download and test it again. Once it goes live in the store, test it, just try downloading it off the actual store. Because sometimes the ad networks and in-app purchases can get messed up when an app goes live versus just being on your native device. If there's one app's got a problem, then some of the other apps might have some problems. But just make sure you do that. This is just the best practice to do once it goes live, or have your virtual assistant do it. And then that's when you start doing your review and your marketing, your social media campaigns, and that's like a bigger topic about how to go out and get lots of marketing going. With an update strategy, keep your code fresh and keep Apple happy. This is something we've been talking about a lot. Just make sure as you go into this process, start to build in, okay, well now my developer is getting all the design codes, but now I'm also going to hand them 2 feature updates. I'm gonna start thinking about that and start to build that into your process. Your most successful codes are priority number 1. So let's say you upload 25 apps into the store and only 6 of them are making you any money or getting downloads. Focus on those 6. Don't try to breathe life into dead apps. It's much better to take apps that are doing well and make them really good. Like, that's just business 101. Like, that's a really, really important lesson. And updates are one of the most important things. That's one of the best ways, and all apps need really good updates. And your unsuccessful apps are second priority. Try changing metadata, icon, screenshots. This is a really good thing to do with a VA, like a virtual assistant, and say, look, all right, the apps that aren't doing that well, I'm going to give it to someone. I'm going to keep my costs really low. I'm going to try to give some CPR to them. But if it doesn't work, just don't worry about it. That's just part of the business. Not everything is going to be a home run, and not everything can be a home run. That's totally fine. And lastly, guys, stay organized. I've talked about this, like, I can't stress this enough. It's really easy to say, I want this to happen right now. I want this to happen fast. I want this to happen every which way. But it's 10 times more important to stay organized and do it one step at a time and make sure everything is bulletproof. Because that's the only way you're really going to be able to scale. And I wish I had done this more often, because when you have 100 apps in the store, how do you leverage? If, let's say, you get a really good direct deal from an ad network and Chart Boost, and they say, well, I only want to be in these 5 apps. How do you know which ones to go in, and how can you delegate that, and how can you make more and more, and how do you not waste time and money? And so this comes down to document everything you can for each app. Write down all the different procedures and the special needs each source code gets. And look, this doesn't need to be like a crazy drawn out process. A lot of it is front heavy, and you need to invest in this early on. But just get it going. Just get in that mindset where you say, like, everything we do should be cataloged. So finally, guys, just a quick overview of what we talked about just to wrap this up. Step 1 is you want to plan ahead. Okay, you want to set up that plan. 2 is you want to research and you want to understand the metadata and the themes that you're going to pick. 3 is you want to get the designer, you want to get the images going. 4 is you want to get the developer up and running. You want to get him or her all set, updating ad IDs, adding any new features. You want to get your iTunes Connect ready to go. You want to make sure that that's all prepped and ready for upload with all the information needed. You want to combine all your graphics with the code, and then you want to have your developer upload it. And then after that, it just comes down to repeating, optimizing your process, and updating all your apps and making sure this gets more and more and more efficient. So finally, just a quick takeaway, guys. Pick a code that's easy and successful. This is just a really good place to start. I think Video Merge is a home run. Just pick a code that you're going to be able to walk through this entire process for. That's going to be a really good place to start. Explain your plan to your coders, your designers, your VAs. Make sure that they understand what this is all about. Set up a timeline. Say, here are the steps. Like, you can literally go through this presentation and just copy this. You just say, here are the 7 steps that I want to do. Here's what we need to think about, and then start breaking that down specific to your business. Separate your skins from each other. Don't start bundling them too early on. You want to make sure that you really have a good system, and then you can start bundling them once you get to scale. Have a clear submission schedule and update strategy. Make sure that you know that, all right, if I'm making 10 apps a month, here's how often I can actually upload them. And maybe I need some new developer accounts, or maybe I need to go to new platforms, or whatever it may be. And as always, organization is the key to scale. So I hope this was very helpful for you guys. Just talking about it's actually made me realize how much this has been a big part of our business and allowed us to create such huge gains. And I really, really hope that it helps you guys a lot too. All right, I will see you soon.